I'm actually going to ask a question, and I want people to tap out the first answer that comes to mind. I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to tap out an answer. I'd like to know, from your perspective, what's the goal? Why bother running these sessions? Why bother running a sales call? What's your goal? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind. What do you think the goal of a sales call is? Now I can see James tapping away, right?
Yeah.
So Liz says to book sales. James says to close, baby. Cha-ching, to make it rain. I'm going to see if anyone else has got any other quick answers. Build rapport. All right. We're getting a little warmer. I like that. Has anyone got a last answer for me? Tap me out one more. And if not, I'm going to give you the answer. James says trust. All right. Dean says invite the right prospects in the organization. Liz says trust. Yeah. So here's the thing. A lot of people assume that the goal of the sales call is to sell, but that's not necessarily the goal of the sales call. Now, James spoke about this last week. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but it's actually to transfer certainty. All right. The goal of the sales call is not actually to try and close the deal. There is only one person on a sales call that it can close the deal, and I can guarantee you it's not you. It's the prospect that sits on the other side of the call. And so when we go into these sales calls thinking our goal is to close, 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 baby, like we did back in the 80s, what was it? ABC, always be closing, we don't get the result that we're looking for. When we go into the call and we remind ourselves that the goal is just to transfer three kinds of certainty: certainty in you, that you're an expert and you know what you're doing, you're not a numpty, you're not an idiot, you're not an internet charlatan. True certainty in the process, right? That it's actually going to get them the outcomes they're looking for. It's going to take them out of pain, bring them to where they want to get to. And then most importantly, that looks a bit messy. Certainty in themselves, because people often don't trust themselves to make the right decision. They're worried. They're always hesitant, pessimistic, operating with fear. James likes to use his acronym. What is it, James? Fear
Fear
is
is an
false.
acronym. It stands for false evidence appearing real.
That's the one, right?
People make excuses for
They
why
do.
it won't work for them, which are usually grounded in self-doubt, illogical self-doubt.
Exactly. Exactly. So the goal of the sales call, from my perspective, is to transfer certainty. And if you can transfer certainty toward yourself, and that is that, hey, you know what you're doing. You're clearly, someone that's got good clout. You're not an idiot, just trying to take their money. Certainty in the process that what you're actually presenting to them makes total commercial sense, and then certainty in themselves that it's not going to fail. Well, then that's when you really start to make sales easy. It's not what Dean says, and I like what Dean says. I may not repeat it with all the words, but not F everything and run, right? Like that's the thing we want to avoid. So if that's the goal, how do we achieve that goal? Well, the sales call that I run, and this is what I encourage a lot of our clients to run with, the structure actually happens across three acts. Well, act one, it's like a play. Act two, act three. And each of these acts has a separate focus and a separate goal. The goal in Act One is to simply discover. The goal in Act Two is to demonstrate. And then the goal in Act Three is to actually diagnose. Discover, demonstrate, and diagnose. Now, today I'm going to dive into Act One, but to add just a little more context to this, when I'm talking about discover, what I really mean is how you open the call. So that's what you're going to do. When we're talking about demonstrate in Act Two, it's drop value, introduce your method. When we're talking about diagnose, this is really what I like to call the bridge and the close. But as I said, I'm going to dive into Act One. Act Two next week, Act Three the week after. So let's dive into Act One, which, as we said, is discover. I personally believe that this is 50% or there's a better way to put this. This is half of your success on a sales call. Is Act One, right? If you screw this part up, I can tell you, you're gonna have a really tough time getting anywhere on the sales call. When you do this properly, it works really well. There's actually a book on my desk. I wasn't going to throw this up there, but if anyone wants to read a really good book on how to open a conversation, this book here, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Police Negotiator. Can you imagine when you're negotiating with a terrorist or something like that? The first 30 seconds, the first minute, the first 2 minutes, pivotal, right? In determining whether someone's going to blow up a building or come out with their hands up. And it's the same thing in a sales call. How we open this call will determine whether or not we're going to have a good call, whether or not the person's going to be open enough with us to actually have a conversation, give us the things that are causing them pain and problems, and be open to listening to us as we move through the call. If we do a good job here, it makes selling way easier. If we do a bad job here, I can tell you got a really, really tough time
I'll
ahead.
tell you the difference. It's really
Yeah.
simple. In the first 15 minutes, at the end of it, they're either like this
Yep.
or they're leaning right in.
Yep.
They're either
Absolutely.
like that or they're right in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so in Act One, there are actually three things that I do, and each sort of matches an outcome or an expectation that I'm looking for throughout this call. And so, first things first is what I call the opening statement. How professional does that sound? The opening statement.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. But the opening statement is really about framing. It's about framing what's coming up. See, no matter the fact that someone signed up for a sales call, if you just lead straight with a pitch, they're going to ask you why why you pitched them. It's so funny because you didn't frame the fact that there was going to be some sort of pitch. In addition to
Yeah,
that,
hi, I want to work with you and I want
yeah.
to know your prices. Why are you pitching me?
It happens. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
People are pessimistic and hesitant, and we've got to remember that humans, all of us, me included, are highly irrational. So the opening statement is really about setting the tone, and it's about framing the call in such a way where it's going to be congruent with the outcome that you're looking for. And I've got my specific opening statement that I'm going to throw out here. So for anyone who has been on a sales call with me before, you might remember this. It might be familiar, and there are some names on here that I know have had calls with me. And my opening statement goes like this. Hey, James. So look, you've set aside the time and you've shown up today. So I appreciate that. People only show up to these calls though for one or two reasons. Either number one, there's a burning sales and marketing challenge that's just doing their head in. And I want to help you solve that today if that's the case with the time that we have. But number two, and most commonly, it's actually because they want me to pitch you something. It's because they've seen something that James and I are selling and they're in dire need of support and they want to work with us. So can you tell me what camp you fall into? So that's my pretty much word for word opening statement. And what I'm doing there is I'm framing the bit that I know I can help with, which is, hey, you might be coming to this with a burning sales and marketing challenge, something that's doing your head in. But I'm reminding them that I'm here for a commercial outcome. But hey, people actually tend to join these calls because they want to buy something from James and I. They're in dire need of help and they're looking to get support. So what I've done is with that opening statement, I've framed the conversation, it's about sales and marketing, and I've framed my outcome, which is I want you to buy something. Can
Yeah,
you see how
and
I did
you're
that?
saying it's really common that people want me to pitch to them.
Yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
if you're
So,
saying, I don't want you to pitch to me, it's an indication that they're the freak.
yeah, exactly, exactly right. So the opening statement is all about framing that what the topic and framing the outcome that you're looking for. So that's how I open every single call without fail, and that's pretty much word for word what I just delivered to you. I never really waver on that. The next bit is what I call permission. I used to call this the yes questions, but now I just call it permission because what we want to do is we want to get them to say yes. So we want to get them to say yes as early in the call as possible. Why? Because if you can get someone saying yes to easy questions, they're going to say yes to the harder questions, including saying yes to your pitch. And that has been proven. Once again, this book actually proved that too. If you can get the terrorist agreeing with you, you're very likely to walk out there with no one being blown up. It's the same thing in a boardroom and a negotiation. It's the same thing if you're selling off a car lot. If you can get someone to agree to the features that they're super excited about on the car, they're very, very likely to spend the extra money on the car. Agree to the things that are important. So the permission piece is about asking the right yes questions. And I do ask a couple. First things first, I'll ask them permission if I can take them through the agenda. So do you mind if I throw down an agenda for how I like to run today's call? Now, by the way, the point of these yes questions is you're not asking questions they like to say no to. So, of course, who's going to say no? Don't worry about it. Just let's screw around here and see what happens. By the way, if someone did say that, or if someone did say, well, look, I don't care about your agenda. I'm just here to blah, 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 blah. I actually usually stop the call, but that happens maybe one in every 30 calls because I know that's not a coachable client. That's not someone I want to work with. So the first yes question I ask has to do with agenda. Do you mind if I take you through an agenda for today's call? And then I actually ask them to agree to the agenda. Do you feel like that's a good way to spend our time today? Does that make sense? And then I ask them if they're ready. And these are like I know it feels weird to say we're trying to get them to say yes to all three of these things because the likelihood of them saying no to them, it's probably not going to happen. But as I said, it's been proven that if you can get someone to say yes, they start to open up. If you can get them to say yes to the easy things, they're going to say yes to the hard things. One of those hard things being what happens next, which is about finding out and discovering the pain. So after I get my permission, which then finishes with, well, are you ready to start the call? Can we get into this? Yeah, of course, let's go for it. I can now roll into the last part of act number one, which is what I call the three most important questions. And the three most important questions in this specific order are as follows. I actually like to lead with what we call the champagne moment. I don't start with, hey, what are your challenges? I don't start with, hey, what does the business look like today? I actually start with the champagne moment, which is where I ask a question like this. Now, I want to kick things off by asking you your definition of success. If we fast forward 12 months from today, and you can totally justify spending a hell of a lot of money on a bottle of bubbly because you're celebrating your wins, define what that success needs to look like. And this is really about understanding what they desire, what their goals are. And I want them thinking about that first because I want to work backwards from there. So once I understand what they really want to achieve, and I try and help them come up with a nice measurable goal. So if we can agree to a measurable goal, if that's something I'm going to obviously use later in the call, but we won't talk about that today. But also I get their mindset in the right place. After the champagne question, I ask them where they are today. So what I'm trying to ascertain is, okay, well, that's where you want to be, right? Where are things right now? Where do things stand for your business today? If we came up with a measurement in the champagne moment, I might try and work out what that measurement looks like today. So if it was a revenue number, maybe it was a different type of benchmark or KPI, whatever it's going to be, I try to work out what that looks like today. And what I'm doing, by the way, is I'm trying to widen the gap as far as possible. That's the goal. So you want to make sure that their champagne moment, which is all the way over here, and where they are today is as wide as possible because your goal, obviously, when you're selling something is to fill that gap. But then I ask, you know, why they're not able to achieve that champagne moment today. And that is, usually about the bottlenecks. Or you can say, where are you stuck? Well, how come you're unable to meet that goal? And how come the business is at this point today? What do you think's holding you back? What do you think has you stuck? What are the list of reasons why this is not working the way you expect it to work? So I start with champagne because I want to know where they want to get to. I work on where they're at today and I try and widen that gap as far as possible. And then I want the list of reasons from their perspective as to why it's not working. And if I've done this right, by the way, all the bottlenecks that they throw out there, all the places that they're stuck are the things that I'm obviously going to do to serve them anyway. So, if I've got them saying, well, it's because, we don't have a good, consistent way of getting leads. And, when we're trying to sell, we're selling less and people are dragging their feet. I'd love to tell them those things, but when they can tell me those things, they're already bought on the idea.
So
And
what
so, yeah, that's act
so
one.
let's unpack each of these things. And I see the Dean's already got a question.
Yeah,
Um, the opening statement's an interesting one. I can see immediately that it's going to work for you. I reckon I could pull it off as well. Now that I'm speaking out loud, I think that everyone else could pull it off as well too. You would just need to write it in your own way,
absolutely.
which we'll do on the Unstuck and
We'll do
Away
in
call.
the next call.
Like Johnny says, or they just want me to pitch them. They want me to pitch them on the best option, the best deal that we've got right now because they want to buy something from us. They want to work with us, right? That would work in our world, but in someone else's world, it might be. But other people just might want to know the terms and conditions and the pricing and how to get started, whatever. I haven't
Exactly.
seen you run through that second bit, the permission bit,
Mhm.
at least in a while anyway. It's interesting what you did there is you pretty much asked the same question 3 times.
Yeah, pretty much.
And again, that requires practice because you'd feel like a complete goofball the first time you do it. You go, aren't I just asking the same question 3 times? I'm going to get you to do it for me again in a second. But
Yeah,
the other reason why I like this question is not just about getting yeses, it's also about giving them a sense of control over the call, but however, in doing so, you're positioning yourself as the leader.
yeah,
So they feel like they have control, but you're the leader of that call because you say, I have an agenda or I have a structure that I'd like to follow.
yeah,
Can
yeah.
you do it again?
Yeah, for sure. So so after I've sort of done my framing, they'll kind of agree to something, and I say, great. So I want to kick this call off. First things first. Do you mind if I take you through the agenda? I have an agenda that I can take us through to guide us in this call today. Do you mind if I take you through that agenda?
Yeah, I'd love you to. Thank you.
Awesome. So then I'll go through the agenda, which is whatever it is for your call. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Then do this. Is that cool with you? Does
Yeah,
that agenda make sense for you? Do you agree?
that makes total sense. Yep.
Awesome. Well, with that stuff out of the way, James, can we get started?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it.
There's three yes questions.
Yeah. And I was saying yes before I was even being asked.
And by the way, I want to make this clear. Like, because I have had people say to me, "Oh, but John, your tone, I couldn't use your tone." You don't have to use my tone. Like, I can tell you, one of the worst ways I can teach you to sell is to be me. Now, that's not because I'm great, although I like to pretend I am. It's mostly because my tone and my words are just words that are natural to me. And half of what makes a good seller is being authentic and being honest and being whatever that looks like for you, right? So if you feel like the words that I just used are uncomfortable, that's okay. They probably should be for people on the call who don't talk like me, but there's your version of that. And so really what I encourage you to look at this as is a framework and a guideline, a structure to run it rather than, oh, I've got to take John's words because they're the words that he's got to use. They're just the words that I use. You can spin this a million different ways. We've hired how many sellers, James? All of them have been different in their own way. They've all followed the same process with their own set of words that made them feel comfortable, that sounded really nice and authentic.
And the first time as well, too, I've seen people just go, hey, I've got just a set of questions that I want to ask you. Can we start there? Just reading off the questions on the
Yeah.
list. And again, I mean, like, it's not like the person on the call like goes, how unprofessional or what an amateur. They just go, oh, this person's got a process and I appreciate that. Now,
Yeah.
we go
Yeah.
into the three most important questions. The first one you've got is the champagne moment. My
Yep.
observation about the champagne moment is that if you can put them in a future place where they want to be,
Yep.
what we're doing is we're future pacing, we're foreshadowing. Everybody's beginning to see where they want to be. That's great. But then Dean has said, do you continue the call if they don't provide a concrete number or goal?
Yeah. Tell you what, I'm gonna do something silly. You ready? Dean, what do you think this is? Let me see. Can I draw this out? Does this look right? Can you see what this is, James?
I'm not game to try and guess what it is.
It's a shovel. You dig, buddy. You dig. If they if they don't give you, yeah, there's the handle, right? If they don't give you a good answer, most of the time I can tell you they won't give you a good answer. Your prospect
Yeah.
is a the the goal of your prospect is to be closely guarded. Okay.
No,
And so,
but I
yeah.
also just think a lot of people don't know. I mean, like, my
Yeah,
famous
they don't know.
story
You've
is
got to
I
guide
said,
them. Show
"Where do
them.
you want to be?" And this woman said, "I want to be famous in Brisbane." And I just
Yeah,
remember that because it's stuck in my head. And I'm like, where do I go with this? So then I grabbed my shovel and I started digging. Like, what does
yeah,
fame mean to you? And I'm asking questions.
exactly.
Why do you want the fame? What does it translates to? And in the end,
Yeah,
she just said, I just need 3 clients a month.
yep.
And I'm
And
like,
you know,
we're
I know
here.
that sometimes it can feel like you're playing a game of 21 questions. Uh, but what you'll find is that for the most part, Dean, people are fairly open. Like they'll give me something. Like people will often start by saying the most simple thing, like why, for me, it's that the business has grown and that, we've got leads coming in. I say, okay, so define growth because growth could be 1% or it could be 1,000%. A
Mm.
1,000% sounds
Could
ridiculous.
be
What is
staff, could be
1%?
money.
It could be, yeah, you could ask them questions about the money, ask them, you've just got to, sometimes you do have to dig with a prospect, but, 3 or 4 questions and usually it's fine. So he does follow up here and he says, so I dig super hard and I build an incredible report, but you often get a person stonewall you if they won't tell you how many leads, how many customers, how much revenue. I tell you what, if someone is adamant and I have had this maybe happen, I've delivered how many sales calls you reckon,
Yeah,
James?
you do about 400 a year, and that sounds
Yeah,
like a lot, but it works out to be
it works out to be
so
like
it
30 a
works out to be
month or
about
something
eight a
like that.
week.
Yeah, yeah, thereabouts, right? So,
Yeah,
so I've
two and a
delivered a
half
lot of
days.
these. Dean, I have had that happen to me maybe 4 or 5 times in the last 3 or 4 years. And I have had to say, I can't help you unless you help me. So you've chosen to show up today. Hey, James, you tell me, do you want my help or not?
I remember Johnny had a guy, and the guy, I kid you not, was wearing a Zorro mask because he
I'll
didn't
remember
want
that
his
one.
face on the
Yeah.
Zoom call.
Yeah, it was funny. I've had some funny ones. Trust me, over time. I had one once. I don't want to get into story time where it was a lady getting stoned on the call. It's
I know
I've
you also had a nude man.
I have had a nude man.
No,
I don't know if
the
he was
nude
nude.
man was better because that was a group training call.
That was a group training, but we don't know if he was fully nude. We just know he was
Yeah,
jealous that it was
he
hot
was
wherever he
fully
was.
nude. He told us he was fully nude.
Oh, right.
He just didn't let the camera track below his belly button.
Yeah, there
Um.
you go. Yeah, well,
Anyway, so the champagne moment is a great one because we want to get people to where they want to be. But the interesting thing is that some people don't know where they want to be because they're so
true.
that that they're so buried in their own. I don't know. What is it like that? They're trapped in the reeds, in the weeds. They're like they just know that they need to get to some place, but they're not clear on it yet. And then sometimes, Dean, your goal when it comes to the champagne moment is actually to tell them what their champagne moment is. So
Yeah,
I've had people and they've said, oh, my goal is just to get to $15,000 a month. And I've had to deconstruct that and build it up and go $15,000 a month is not enough. You need to
yeah,
be getting to $30,000 to $45,000 a month. Otherwise, go get a job.
yeah,
Go step back into corporate or do something else because you're not aiming high enough. At which point they say, well, how will I get there? And then I can say, well, let's talk about that today.
yeah.
I've got one more question, Johnny, before we wind up this bit.
Okay.
And I think I just gave you the answer to that or the clue, but it's a fun one. So when you're talking through the champagne moment bit or where they're at today or where they want to get to,
Yeah,
people will often say, "Oh, and how am I going to do that, or how will I get there?" And what do you
yeah.
say?
Well, for me, when it comes down to, well, how am I going to get, like, if someone says, oh, I can't do that, or how am I going to get that result? I've been trying, what I get a lot? I've been doing this now for like 15 years. In the last 5 years, I haven't been able to crack that nut. I actually go back to framing. That's what I do. Well, as I said, you're probably here for one or two reasons, right? Either number one,
Mm.
you got a burning sales and marketing challenge that you want to solve on today's call, and number two, you want to buy something. I'm here to teach you how you can do both.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
because
Cool.
that does come up a lot. Now, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but
No, because
that's what I
what I was
do.
looking for, and I think it's a good one to end on, is that reminding everyone that this section is called the discovery section,
Yeah,
and some people want answers in the discovery section,
that's
or
true.
worse, sometimes we want to give them answers
Oh yeah,
in
don't
the
do
discovery section. We go, oh, we can help with that. I'll tell you what we do right now. Hang on, let me get a pen and paper.
it. Yeah, yeah. You got to trust your process. Trust the process you've mapped out on this call. And look, I guess this is an answer to that question, James, will become a little bit clearer next week because next week, what are we doing? Act two, which is where we pack the call full of value and we introduce our method. And we want to remind people because look, I will say maybe a better question to ask is this: what do you do when a prospect is on the call and they start trying to direct the call? You bring it back. You have to bring it back. You need to maintain control on these calls. A lot of people, because maybe they haven't got enough sales calls, or maybe they're feeling the scarcity bit a little bit, they'll run with what a client says, right? Or a prospect says on the call. So if a prospect wants to go this way and you weren't expecting to go that way, they'll go that way just because they don't want to upset anyone or ruffle any feathers. What I know is you've got to bring it back to this piece here. Why bother setting an agenda if you're going to let the prospect run off and do whatever they want? Because when we complete the picture, you're going to want to follow it.
Yeah. And they can say they're always going to run off in a slightly different direction anyway. But as John's going to demonstrate next week, is that when you're running through this middle piece and you've got a methodology, there are usually three parts to it. So at least one of those three parts is going to come back to their immediate need. But if I go back to someone, I say, how do you know when you've made it? And they say, I'm famous in Brisbane. Or sometimes they'll just say something like, oh, I just need a website. And that's their champagne moment. And we go, well, why do you need a website?
Yeah.
And then we're bringing it back to what is usually going to be the champagne moment that they need, which is going to tie back to the second piece of the puzzle, where we can start to what was the word you wrote? You wrote demonstrate and value. Were those the two words you wrote?
Yep.
Demonstrate
Yeah.
and value on the second one?
Yep. Demonstrate
There we go.
value
Value and method. There we go. Value and method. Because what we want to do is we want to demonstrate how to get from A to B because we've mapped it. We know where they are. We know where they want to get to. We're going to demonstrate how to get from A to B. And to do that, we're going to use a method. And in the process of delivering the method, we're going to bring it back to them. And in that context, deliver value. All right, rock and roll. Hey, thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, mate.